Hello and welcome to this Glasgow Film Festival online Q&A for Black Bear. My name's Robbie Collin and I'm delighted to be joined by the film's writer and director, Lawrence Michael Levine. Lawrence, congratulations on the film and welcome to Glasgow.
Pleasure to be here, it really is.
I have to say I'm very glad we're talking about Black Bear after everyone's had a chance to see it, because I'd have no idea where to draw the spoiler line here. How much are you comfortable generally with audiences knowing about this film before they go in?
I think comfortable, it's sort of, what can you do about it? I feel that the movie is best experienced without knowing anything going in, including a trailer. When they cut the trailer, I was concerned that they were revealing a backstage element to the film, and but there was really no way to create an exciting trailer out of just part one, you know. So we kind of had to do it, and I settled for that. But I would have preferred no trailer. I don't like watching trailers. You know, I like just knowing nothing about any movie I watch going in. But that being said, you have to market a film, so.
I mean, was there one part of it that came first and gave rise to the others? You know, did you envisage it as being a backstage, behind-the-scenes drama in the first place, and then the part one grew out of that, or was it vice versa?
The second part, I guess the two parts were conceived almost a decade apart from one another. The first part is more recent, and the second part came to me about 10 years ago in an outline. And I knew I wanted to tell a story that showed a singular theme, the theme of betrayal, from two different angles. In one part, the main character would be the betrayer, and in the next part, she would be the betrayed. But I didn't know exactly what those two stories were going to be. In the first part, so I started to write it, and then I was searching my mind for a similar story where I could do that reversal. And I remembered something I had written 10 years previously, an outline. That kind of grew out of a period where my wife and I were working together. It just started. We just fall in love, and we're also working together, and the complexity of it. There were some issues around, her wanting me to put her in my films, and me feeling like that was a demand, that she should love me without me doing that, and her feeling like if I loved her, I'd want to put her in the films and things like that. So we had those dynamics in our relationship, and out of it grew this outline about 10 years ago. And I realized that I could pair these two films together, and it would be really interesting because of the backstage element. So if that one came second, for a time, the audience might think that it was the backstage drama of part one, slowly realize it isn't, that something weirder is going on. And so it was about weaving those two stories together.
It might be extremely off base or coincidental, but the approach reminded me of a Korean director called Hong Sang-soo.
Yeah.
Is like, I love it, but it's like nothing else I've really seen apart from probably this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I was inspired by him, definitely. I had watched, I don't know how conscious it was. I guess it was kind of I don't know how conscious it was, but I had been watching his films at the time. And I was really interested in the way that he created a unique cinematic universe with elements of surrealism and realism, with the most basic tools, just with the most basic cinematic tools. He just has a tripod and a zoom lens that he didn't start using until a few years ago. So so I definitely admire him, and he was in the soup of influences that I had when I was writing it, along with, many others like John Cassavetes and Woody Allen and, Ingmar Bergman.
Can you tell me a bit about gauging how much you can trust an audience to go along with the conceit? Because something I love about the film, and I think it's in Hong's work as well, is that you can sense the film is just doing what it's doing. There's no element of, we have to somehow lead the audience through this by the nose, if that makes sense.
Yes. I also, I would call it like a cinema of disorientation. And I think, yes, in Hong Sang-soo's movies, you slowly get the revelation of details that accumulate over time. In many Hollywood films, you'd get all your exposition at the top, and then you'd know what you needed to know about the characters so that you're with them when you face these external obstacles. But in this film, and in So's films, and Cassavetes too, for example, there's no real external obstacles. The obstacles are internal. And that, therefore, the exposition can be revealed more slowly in the flow of the film. And I find it really exciting when you're plunged into a movie and you have to let it wash over you. And there's something I enjoy about the disorientation, like a film. To me, like Mikey and Nikki, Elaine May's Mikey and Nikki works this way, where, again, details are slowly revealed, backstories slowly revealed, and in the meantime, you've got this interpersonal conflict that's kind of roiling.
You can build this into the technique as well, right? Because there's the initial sequence where Aubrey Plaza walks up from the jetty to the house. The camera, like it's very kind of poised and serene, and it's tracking what's going on, but it's at a remove from the action itself. Whereas when we get particularly first of all into the drunken conversation, but then later much more so in the film shoot, your shooting style is much freer.
Yes, yeah. I really wanted to the movie. Even though it was two parts, I felt needed to have an overall kind of build. So one of the ways that I dealt with that was by increasing the aggressiveness, let's say, of the camera work. The film starts out being more classical, and then gradually becomes more documentary style.
When you were writing the script, did any parts of it surprise you? I mean, you've spoken about the fact that these two premises linked together. That wasn't something you'd planned from the start. But were there any, developments or reactions of any of the characters that when as it went down on the page, that was kind of a moment of revelation in itself, rather than something pre-planned?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, the notion of pre-planning a movie. But to address the case of Black Bear, I really only knew that I wanted to tell two stories of betrayal. One in which the character was the betrayer, and one, or the home wrecker, or whatever it was, and the other in which she had her home wrecked. And then I wanted the characters to reverse, so that the person who was betrayed in part one would then be a party to the betrayal in part two, right? So I just had this kind of concept that was very, it's simple. And then as far as that, I just took notes on the characters, which is kind of my first step that I always do when I'm writing something. I do, character biography. I think about all the salient details of the character's life. I have a whole kind of checklist that I go through. And for Black Bear, after I did that, I did no plan. So really the whole movie, in a sense, was a surprise to me. While I was writing the dialogue, I didn't know what the actors were going to say and do next. I kind of knew that it was where it was going. Like I had a beginning and an end. These people show up at a country house, and it ends in disaster. but I didn't know the specifics of it at all. So it was all kind of a discovery to me. I'm writing something now, and I don't have the same kind of sense of freedom, but I think that I was really pent up. I'd done a lot of work in Hollywood as a screenwriter, working with production companies and studios and networks, and it's a very collaborative process. It's a very structure-oriented process. It's very external obstacle based and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to break away from it. So for me, this was actually about having a good experience for myself. It was about being free and liberating myself from all the constrictive kind of status quo ideas about screenwriting in Hollywood, which have their place. But, you know, 3-act structure, 8 sequences, all these different kind of formulas that I'm totally aware of and have used. I just kind of wanted to break away from them and see if I could do something that came from a different kind of energy. Because I know there's lots of great movies out there that, you know, don't have 8 sequences. So I was just trying to have a more liberated process, and I did, but what came out of it was not a very commercial movie, obviously, and I had no idea if it was going to get made or if it was going to do anything, if any actors would want to do it. You know, it was really kind of for myself, with the hope that it would turn out okay and we would make it, you know. But I was actually really doing it for myself. It was very therapeutic to me. There was a lot of bad stuff going on in my life at the time, and I was having a lot of problems, and the culture and the world seemed to be in a terrible, terrible place. I wrote it in 2017. Mm-hmm. I think I might have started right around when Trump took office, and I'm not a fan, and what he did to this country and everything. So it was kind of a dark time inside and out. And I think that and my desire to do something more creative led me to do this movie that I really didn't have as much planning for. Right now I'm writing a movie that I'm planning a lot, but it still feels like I'm coming up with it. You're coming up with the plan. That's still out of the blue. You know, you're always creating out of the blue. So.
I think a huge part, I mean, you spoke about the effect of not having these external forces on the characters. I think a huge part of its success is down to having Aubrey Plaza in that central role, because there's the sequence when she and Christopher Abbott are walking up the path initially towards the house. You know, they're both essentially, I mean, they're explaining to each other who they are, and yet a lot of I think both actors, but Aubrey in particular, they have ways of delivering information where it just kind of, it seems to almost pose more questions of the viewer. You're constantly kind of questioning, and this is, you know, it's down to her kind of enormous talent for deadpan comedy, I think. But it's really interesting to see that deployed in a way where the intended effect isn't humor first and foremost, but it's to unsettle and it's to destabilize. So tell me about getting your 3 leads involved. You know, did you work with them previously, or you know, how did you select them for the roles?
Well, with Aubrey, I knew her personally. We had a personal relationship, and I'd always thought she'd be really interesting to write for because she is enigmatic. And what I look for when I write scripts is to create what I would call like active dialogue. So it's not dialogue that's just sitting there limply giving exposition, but the actors are using their words to achieve particular ends in the same way that you would pursue an external obstacle. You know, like you have a big date and your car gets stolen. What do? You know, you got to borrow a car, go to your friend's house, whatever. You know, like those are external objectives. I got to get a new car. With me, it was like people who use words to seduce, people who use words to charm, people who use words to get status. And when you talk to Aubrey, she's very indirect. You know, she's saying things and the meaning is sort of obscure and can be interpreted in a lot of ways. I like dialogue like that. And that's just her natural way of kind of being. So it seemed like a good fit to write for her because it just seemed like there was a synergy. And then with Sarah, I didn't know her. I saw her in James Schamus's movie Indignation, and I thought it was like a brilliant, very brilliant performance. And I thought, if I ever get a chance to work with her, that'd be great. And then Chris Abbott, I love. I saw him in James White, and I just think he's one of the greatest actors working right now. And I wanted him to be in another film that I was trying to cast that never got off the ground. And I offered him the role and he turned it down, but I figured, try again. And this time it worked. Different project. Also, Aubrey's agent, Chris Andrews, was really supportive of the project, and he used his CAA connections. He's a CAA agent. He's actually Sarah's agent also, and then he knew Chris's, so he was pretty instrumental in casting.
How did you discuss with the three leads about delineating between these two different versions of themselves? The two, I mean, was there a particular way you had of thinking about it on set to kind of separate the part one and the part two versions of who they were playing?
Usually I don't tell the actors anything unless they ask. That's the way I kind of approach directing, is that I'm there to help, and that if they have questions, I'd be prepared to answer them. So like going into the shoot, I do a script breakdown of the material as if I wasn't the writer of it. I forget that I wrote it, and I take a very analytical director's eye, and I break down the script, and I make sure that every line has an intention behind it, that I know what that intention is. I do all that prep work, and then I don't do anything with it unless they ask me. So, for example, there was no conversation with Chris or Aubrey about what they were going to do differently in part two. It was on the page, and they understood it. For Sarah, she had a question of, well, am I imitating Aubrey from the first section, or am I channeling just the spirit of a homewrecker or something, or someone? But, an actor would never judge their character in that way. So homewrecker is the wrong way to put it. But, as what her motivations would be for doing this to the person in part two. And we decided that she wasn't going to do an imitation, because Aubrey's character hadn't changed. She was still the same person, really. So we decided, no, let's not do an imitation, and that was about it. Just do what you would do. Like Sarah, Sarah and I just said she should just do what she would do if she were in the position of that character, and then we switched the wardrobe so people get the idea. That was the only conversation I had with any of the actors about what they were doing. And like, for example, Chris started imitating my mannerisms in part two, because he had worked he just shot the movie in order. So he'd already worked with me through part one. So he had a good sense of my mannerisms and stuff. And he kind of used them in the role, which was pretty funny.
I was going to say the dysfunction and the chemistry of the film shoot sequence is incredibly authentic. And I mean, I'm talking about the peripheral characters as well. That the prompter who couldn't keep track of the script is just stomach churning stuff.
Yeah, that was true of the actual movie.
Right? Did you find
No,
that?
No. I mean, it wasn't that dysfunctional, but the script supervisor was never in the right place.
Right.
Which was life imitating art. I mean, that was in the script.
I mean, how in terms of wrangling these different sort of bubbles of characters within that, because you have these little moments of chemistry, like there's a little bit of drama or friction between two people on set that will then be kind of left for a while and then you'll come back to it later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much of that were you able to kind of bring in from personal experience, and how did you, given the start of the film is so tightly circumscribed around three people, how different was it to write that second part?
It was really easy to write the second part. I actually don't even remember doing it. I remember writing the first part, which probably means that I agonized a little bit, but I don't have any memory at all of the second part. It's like someone else wrote it. But it did. I mean, all of it comes from my life. You know, like I said, I've made 6 movies with my wife that were all low budget. And there's just a lot of memories and a lot of lived in experience from having done that, and also working with a partner. The only thing that's not autobiographical about the movie is that I never did that. I never, pretended to have an affair to get a good performance out of her, and then fell in love with the person. That's all just conceit. But everything else is totally autobiographical. The AD's stomach problems, those are mine. I for years I'm lactose intolerant, and for years I had no idea. So I would be drinking all this coffee on set and just having these terrible stomach problems. Also I spill stuff. That's a bit. I'm such a guy who's always spilling. So that stuff was brought in. Yeah, it's all, and most of the problems that you see the cast and crew having and the backstage kind of dynamics and love affairs and all, that's all stuff that's pulled from, like I said, all my indie filmmaking experiences that I had with Sophia.
What about the lake house location? Because I mean, it's just, I'm assuming it must be a place where people shoot films, because it's just so beautiful, and it's so kind of, well, I mean, maybe obviously not designed specifically for this, but there's a lot of different, given the different rooms and the different spaces, you can set up a lot of dynamics within that building, right? That it's very versatile as well as being very beautiful.
Yes, that's what I liked about it, but I don't think that anyone has shot a movie there before or since. It's very remote. It's 8 hours from New York City, and it's solar powered. So there were a lot, and it gets no internet and no cell phone service. It's really, really remote. It's just deep in the Adirondack Mountains in deep, deep forest. There's not many places for people to stay. There's not many food options. It was a very, very inconvenient place to shoot. And interestingly, I wrote my friend showed me his family had I don't know what you would call it, a bungalow colony or a camp, where the family had a bunch of small houses around a lake. And so I wrote it for that specific place. And what that specific place had was, it had all these structures that surround a lake. So the lake was in sight of all the different structures, and I set it in 3 different structures. I couldn't find anything else besides the house we shot in that had 3 separate structures. You could see the lake from all of them. And there was nothing on the other side of the lake, just trees, because I wanted it to feel remote. I didn't want to see houses and lights. I wanted it to feel, when she looks out at the water, that there's nothing else there. Interestingly, we discovered this great fog and mist when we got there that covered up anything that would have been on the other side anyway. So that was whatever. Maybe I didn't need to be so strict about that. But anyway, but that's why we chose the house, because it had these very specific strictures, because I'd written it for a specific place.
Did it require much augmentation? I mean, there's this amazing shot of Alison behind a glass cabinet in part 1, where it's almost as if she's got a huntress's bow strapped across her torso. There's so much, and then obviously you've got the reveal of the Buddhist statue as well. There's so much in there that is like kind of narratively and like symbolically fascinating. Did you have to bring much of that in, or was that again that was already present?
No, we had to bring the Buddha in for sure. The house, the furniture in the house was a mixture. It was a mixture, but a lot of stuff in the house was there. One augmentation that we did was this house actually had bears all over it. It had bear like tchotchkes. I don't know. Do you know that term in Scotland?
Yeah, no, recognize it. Yeah.
Okay. Like it had like bear tchotchkes all over the place. Bear envelope openers and bear statues and bear lamp frames and all this crazy stuff. So we had to like take some bears out. But like the bear that rolls through, there's this taxidermy bear that rolls through, and that was just there.
Wow.
So there was a lot of bear shit there. I took a picture of every single thing. It came to like 100 little bear things, bear throw pillows that, had a bear embroidered on it or whatever. There was a lot of stuff.
And we're almost out of time, but I want to quickly ask about the real bear. How do you direct a bear? I mean,
I did. Yeah, we weren't able to get like a really proper trained bear. So we got a pretty untrained bear, and it didn't do anything I wanted, and I didn't get the shots that I wanted. I imagined the ending very differently. I imagined the ending to be a wide shot of Allison and the bear in the same frame, and them kind of charging toward each other, which I think would have been more exciting. And
there's a beautiful ambiguity to the way that it unfolds, though. I think that kind of look that she gives the bear is, I mean, in the Aubrey Plaza way, like we're saying, it's hard to read. But look, we've hit time now. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lawrence, and congratulations again on the film.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the conversation.
Okay.
Hi, Glasgow.
Take care. See you later.
Wish I was there.